Welcome to Whiskey Talks. My name is Andrew Nui, and today I'm privileged to have Christine Deehring, founder and owner of Bump Boxes, as well as Paul Singh, Chief Revenue Officer of Bump Boxes. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew.
And so, today we're going to be talking about the story of Bump Boxes. So, Christine, if you can start off, tell us the story of how did Bump Boxes even come about?
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, you know, yeah, gosh, it's such a great story. It
Oh,
starts with my daughter.
don't be shy. You were slinging spreadsheets at Caterpillar.
Yeah, I mean, I can go back all that way. Yeah. So my husband and I met at Bradley. So we're
Yeah, there you go. There you
Peoria
go.
people, right? So that's where it really all started. So we met at Bradley. My husband, and I both worked at Caterpillar. He left Cat and worked in real estate for a few years, and I was actually a CPA at Caterpillar for about 7 years. And my husband and I, it was funny. So we found out we were pregnant, and I think every story starts with like a life shift, basically. So we saw that positive pregnancy test, and it's like, the first like 5 minutes you're super excited, no words can describe what that feeling is like. And then shortly thereafter, then like the panic starts to set in of, oh my gosh, I'm going to be responsible for another human being. And like it was like that moment that started it all for me. I really made a huge lifestyle shift when I found out I was pregnant. I changed everything I was eating, everything I was putting like on my skin. I really kind of made that huge lifestyle shift there. And then as I was talking to friends that were recently getting pregnant too, they were also doing the same lifestyle shift right when I was doing it. And the one common thread was that we were all stressed out about it. There was misinformation everywhere. And that's really where the idea started, was, okay, here I am buying all of these products to try to figure out what was safe for my baby and what actually works. And that's really where it started from, was really this concept of making this a lot easier for moms everywhere. And it should be easier for moms everywhere. We shouldn't have to worry about what we're eating, what we're putting on our skin, all of those, harsh chemicals that are out there. So that's really where the foundation was. And then what was interesting was, I had used my dining room table to basically pull all the products that worked for me. And I started, basically configuring them into when mom would need them at what month and what stage of pregnancy. And that's really, where it all started. And so I was working at Cat. I came back from maternity leave. I was working at Cat for about a year to a year and a half. And then doing Bump Boxes at night along with my husband. So we were blogging, trying to figure out how to, launch a website, really kind of trying to pull it all together. So we were basically working, two full-time jobs with a 1-year-old. So it was super exciting. It was super exciting. So, but that's really where it all started. I left my corporate job April 15th of 2015. And it's been an incredible journey ever since. But that's really where it all started. It was just the need to protect my daughter from the very beginning.
Wow. That really is the quintessential user innovator journey. And so I want to dig a little bit, if that's okay with you, Christine.
Yeah,
Did you ever think that you would be, you were, like Paul was saying, slinging spreadsheets at
I'm not going to live
Caterpillar?
that one down now.
right.
We got a one-on-one with Christine this afternoon. I'm
I mean,
that.
I mean, that's what accountants are good at, right? That's
Yeah.
what we love, spreadsheets. We love Excel. Yeah, I mean, I think that, what's interesting is, I spent all of my time in spreadsheets, which still is applicable now, right? Running a company. I mean, obviously the spreadsheets don't go away, right? So I'm thankful for that foundation. But yeah, it's definitely fun, kind of, especially when we like first started to now, like understanding each aspect of the business, right? From revenue and our marketing tactics to our operations and how to scale that with our growth. I mean, there's just, it's really been exciting. There's been a lot of fun projects along the way. But yeah, it's definitely been a lot more exciting than just sitting in spreadsheets. So.
So did you, so then I guess, when you were growing up, did you ever want to run a business? Did you think that you would be running a business?
No, I mean, honestly, I think growing up, and I don't know if this is something like with growing up in the Midwest. I think we're all kind of raised with like the thought process of going to work for a company, not necessarily starting your own company. And I think that that's something that like we can definitely work on changing, right? But yeah, I mean, I think growing up, it's like I think it's like work hard, get good grades, get to college, get that corporate job. But like I don't think there was enough of kind of like this startup mentality when we were younger, which is changing now. But yeah, when I was younger, I mean that's why I ended up at Cat, right? Yeah.
So, okay, so you're pregnant with your first child. You were laying these things out on the table, and then you were seeing this business opportunity. At what point did this business opportunity become, hey, I'm going to start a business?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I mean, I think one of the scariest things is, leaving your comfortable corporate job to start something new. I mean, that's really, it really can be scary. So I think, one of the things that we did early on was project out. So like based on what we were able to do and to sell while I was at Cat, we could project out and see, okay, we'll hit this milestone at X date. And so like it really was we took a leap and we took a risk, but it was a calculated risk. And I think that's how we've always ran this business is we're always trying things and we're failing at a lot, but the ones that work really 10x our business. And so it's making those calculated risks along the way and doing it quickly that really matters.
And so, okay, so now I want to invite Paul into the conversation.
Yeah.
So, how did you end up meeting Paul? Because he's not from here.
And I'm calling you guys from just outside of Washington, D.C. Do you want her to answer it? Either way, whatever you like.
Maybe you can start, Paul, and then we'll hear from Christine.
Yeah, this will be interesting because there's probably like my version, her version, and the truth is somewhere over there. So we'll figure out where that we'll figure it out.
Where that ends up.
We've never done this before. So a little bit of context. I live here in the Washington, D.C. area. Pre-COVID, I was up there, every Monday, Tuesday. I think as we get back to, reopening and stuff like that, I'll be back pretty often. So that being said, though, I wear two hats, by day, if you will. I run the revenue teams at Bump Boxes, and today that comprises our subscription box business, our corporate maternity programs, our insurance and reimbursables stuff, our prenatals, a bunch of stuff that we do. But my other hat that I wear is I'm a pretty active angel investor. I co-founded a venture firm about 10 years ago called 500 Startups. It still runs today. We have about 200 employees over there now. And then separately, or in a parallel path, I've been personally investing in about 200 companies a year since 2008. So I was first money in companies like FreshBooks and Mint.com, MakerBot, Credit Karma, The Real, just a bunch of companies. And how I kind of, where our paths started to align or collide, if you will, is that, the dirty secret of the tech community is that like everybody thinks everything starts in Silicon Valley. The reality is that like for anybody that's ever been to Silicon Valley, just go to the local coffee shop and ask people to show them their driver's license or show them, like just ask them where they were born. The reality is like Washington, D.C. and San Francisco are very similar in the sense that very few people are from here or there, right? And another way to say that is great companies start everywhere else. And in the past, they had to go to Silicon Valley to get access to expertise, all that stuff, right? Our thesis, starting in 2008, was that great companies started elsewhere, right? FreshBooks, for example, was in Toronto. Dwala, huge payments companies based in Des Moines, right? So anyway, the point is though, is that like my thesis was, let's just go everywhere else. So from 2008 to 2015, I just sat on airplanes. Like this is going to sound crazy, but my dirty secret was to sit on the cheapest United Airlines flight every Monday and just see where it goes. Like that sounds crazy, but before kids, I could do that. And so I would end up in these other places and I'd go to co-working spaces. I would go to demo days. I would meet as many people as I could, and I would take bets. And we can separate conversation on how you do that. But like, I would just take a lot of bets and invest in them. So, but by 2015, I'm like starting to figure out, hey, I got a family, I can't like do that as often, but I wanted to still meet founders. So I bought an RV. And so I bought an RV. I sort of kitted it out so that my family could live in it full time as we did it. And the goal was simply to go to all the in-between places. And so for about 2 or 3 years, 3 years, I think, we lived in one new city or town every single week and just kind of kept cruising, right? Mm-hmm. And the goal was to stay out of the big cities. So we didn't go to New York, San Francisco, Chicago, right? And so I just started blogging about it and tweeting about it. And that's how I met so many interesting people. And along the way, I was like investing in daycares in Sioux Falls and code schools in Rhode Island and taco trucks in Albuquerque. It was really eye-opening. And then one day, the guy that had your job before you, Andrew, I think, Randon, emailed me and he's like, hey, I live in Peoria. You should check this out. And I was like, I looked it up on the map and I'm like, oh yeah, there's an interstate. I'll just go. And so fast forward a little bit. I think that was 2018, maybe. I think so. It was April of 2018.
Yeah.
And so I parked the RV, if you can imagine this in your heads, for anybody listening, it's like, it's a 33-foot Airstream, right? So like with my truck in the Airstream, we're like just about the same length as an 18-wheeler. And so I roll in, parked the truck right outside where the office used to be, I think, right? It's like down there by the downtown. Anyway, parked it there and had a great couple days. Randon introduced us to a bunch of things. There was like a startup event one night. There's just a bunch of cool stuff happening. One day he says, by the way, you should check out this startup in town called Bump Boxes. It's on the north side of town. You're going to have to go there. Like they're not like just the schedules. They're not going to be able to join any of our events down here. You're going to have to go there. And I'm really embarrassed about this. In my head, Peoria is about that big. So I was like, oh, yeah, I will meet them at 9:30. I think it was like a Wednesday. I'm like, yeah. 9:30, we'll meet. Yeah, great. And I had seen on the map that there was a Starbucks like right across the corner from like where their office was. Anyway, I didn't look at the map. I didn't realize that like, even though Peoria is not big, it's also not little. So it's anyway, long story short, I roll into this meeting like 20 minutes late. They're like, Lee and Christine are standing at the front door. Like in my mind, I can see their faces still. Like they were so polite, but they were probably like, what the fuck, man? I didn't even bring them coffee. I'm like standing there with a cup of coffee and I'm like, hey, I'm sorry I'm late. By the way, I just realized there's pictures of me back here. I'm not so self-conceited or whatever. My birthday was yesterday. So my wife and the kids put all these around. So sorry, I'm just finding faces. I'm not self-absorbed, I promise. But anyway, I walk in and I'm like standing there and I'm embarrassed. I'm holding this one cup of coffee. I didn't even bring anything for them. And they were so polite and they're probably thinking like, what the hell, man? And so fast forward a little bit, when I go to meet companies, it's not like they were not pitching. That's not what this whole tour was about. It was really about like meeting as many entrepreneurs as we could. And, if they needed money, if anybody needed money, sure, we could talk about that. If they needed advice, we could talk about that. If they needed connections to somebody in my network, we could do that. Like the whole tour was about having conversations with people that were doing interesting things. So Christine and Lee gave me a tour of the place. I think at the time, maybe it was like 5 or 6 people. I don't remember. I don't think it was very big at the time, Christine.
Yeah. It was probably 4 or 5 people. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, the building, for those of you that are, there in Peoria, like the building is right off of North Pioneer. It's, it's right there, like kind of near that Honda dealership back there. And so, the warehouse on the back and the office space in the front. And so they gave me the tour and then we went upstairs. The conference room is up on the 2nd floor in that building. Mm-hmm. And anyway, we're talking and look, in order to fund, so like today I've invested in, I'm on the cap table of just shy of 3,000 companies. So you can kind of do the math, right? Like you've got to meet with tens of thousands of founders to be able to find those 3,000 to do the deal, right? So like in my head, I've seen a lot. And so they're walking me through the business, and the meeting was supposed to be 30 minutes. I think it was just in and out. That's all the time they had. It's all the time I had. Like 20 minutes into the meeting, I'm like trying to keep eye contact with them. And I'm like texting Dana, my wife, under the table. And I'm like, hey, like, cause she's at another event, you know, with Randon, I think somewhere else. And I'm like, hey, whatever you're doing, just cancel it. And you should get over here. And so like, she's, you know, I never send her that text, right? Like we can always, you know, whatever. So she knew that she didn't have to like ask, she just kind of did it. And then she dropped some other meetings. We rescheduled those for later. She came over, and I think we ended up spending almost the rest of the day together. And the part I want to give Christine a minute to talk, because like the last thing the thing that I remember the most though was I remember thinking like, okay, these guys have like built, I think at the time revenue was probably about 2 million a year, maybe it was 4 million a year, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, it was right in that range. Yeah.
And that's really amazing. That's awesome, because like they had not really raised, you know, any money. Like that's not like, you know, that's not the narrative. So anyway, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking like, God, if they've done this with that, without that, just imagine what they could do if we, right? And so now I'm like banging on the table. I'm like, you could be bigger. Like, I think this is like a multi-billion-dollar company. And I just, and they were like so polite, and they probably thought I was crazy. So let me pause there, because there's more to it, like what happened over the next few days. But that was our first interaction. Like, crazy guy in a trailer shows up late to the meeting, doesn't bring any coffee, and then spends the rest of the day banging on that table upstairs, talking about how big it could be. So let me pause there, Andrew. Let's see where you want to take the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So Christine, you know, we've heard from the outside looking in. Now we want to hear from the inside looking out. What was that like for you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
Just,
no, I think.
Yeah, I want to hear it. I've never asked Christine about this too. Like, I want to know exactly what you were thinking back then, even if it's crazy.
No. I mean, I remember, yeah, like I think you hit it spot on. I mean, like that's exactly how I remember it. And I think, well, and the funny thing is, like when we were waiting, I'm like thinking to myself, oh gosh, here's just another VC coming to Peoria, like that. You know what I mean? Like.
Oh, side note, real quick. I found out from Lee, I think a couple weeks later, that they had run into one of my employees at 500 Startups a couple of years before, who treated them super poorly. And so like it's super embarrassing later on. But anyway, so here I am.
Because we had gone to San Francisco, I think, for like a demo day or something. Yeah, I can't remember. But yeah, so like, I mean, in our mind, like we were just like, okay, like we'll see where this goes, right? But like we had other like VCs kind of stop in, just to kind of like see what was going on. So, but yeah, I mean, it was definitely interesting though, like meeting Paul and Dana, because I think there were a lot of similarities between us. I mean, they're a husband and wife team. I mean, like they hustle hard to find all these deals and everything. So I think that was like one of the things that like Lee and I like appreciated. It was like, okay, like we're also a husband and wife team too. They kind of understand us, like, you know, and yeah, and kind of on that level. But yeah, I mean, I think I remember like meeting up in the conference room, and I think like it was probably one of like the best conversations like we've ever had, right? Like, I mean, yeah, because I think we were up there for what, like 4 hours?
Yeah.
I mean, it was like the rest of the afternoon.
It was pretty much the whole day. Like, because I don't think I got back until like maybe 3 or something. So yeah, and then I remember like, so, you know, and let me kind of, oh, sorry, Christine, finish your thought, because I want to add a little bit more context too.
Yeah, no, you're fine. Yeah, I mean, I think like, yeah, I'm trying to remember back to like our first meeting, and I think like you and Lee met up, there was like some sort of mixer or something.
That's
like,
right. Yeah.
Remember that?
Night. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, because like, yeah, I was gonna go, and then I think like Ainsley was sick and Lee wasn't gonna go. I was like, you need to go. You know, you should go. You know what I mean? Like, talk to Paul a little bit more. And yeah, and then I think like what was it like? I think you guys left, and then like 3 or 4 days later, you were like cruising through Peoria again and stopped again.
Well, yeah. Well, so what happened was is that like, so let me kind of add a little bit of context, because in my head, so, you know, outside looking in, right, to use your language, Andrew, you know, here's the thing, you know, starting companies, so there's a couple things that are very common about starting companies. And let me also say, by the way, look, I didn't come from money. Like, I was a bricklayer as recently as 22 years ago, and I got paid 33 cents a brick. And I was exposed to the tech world because a startup was, this town that I live in was 8,000 people growing up. We're a dairy farming town. And so like, all I knew was just my trade, which was, making patios. And this startup in town called America Online, nobody would lease any space to them, right? Because in the mid 90s, nobody knew what the tech world was, and landlords didn't know how to underwrite those tenants. So the only place that AOL could be was out here in the dirt, because like, honestly, it sounds terrible to say, but like as farmers were dying off, the barns were available. Like, it sounds horrible to say, but that's like the only place they could go. So anyway, long story short, I got exposed to that, and I was like, whoa, all the preconceptions I ever had about technology went away on my first day at AOL. Anyway, that's a separate story. But so like, when I'm looking at, I'm looking across the table at Christine and Lee, what I saw was a couple interesting, like, high level nuggets. Number one, when we think about like I have this like thesis in my head about, the things that we invest in, right? And just to kind of like set the stage, I think that like from the 1950s to about 2005, I think we were in like what I would call the first phase of technology companies, right? And that to me means we were building silicone, we were building hardware and wires, and like figuring out how to like connect computers to each other. And that phase was for about 50 years. Let's call it 1950 to 2000, just for round numbers. I think that once that matured to a certain point, right around 2000, you saw an explosion of what I would call phase two companies, which was online. And you saw the rise of PayPal, eBay, Facebook, LinkedIn, right? Massive online platforms that like connected the world. And I would say phase two of technology companies was about 2000 to 2015. I think as an investor, I think we're at now what I would call the third phase of technology companies. We've built all the hardware and the connectivity. We've built all these online platforms, even like this, Zoom, right? Mm-hmm. And now we're in this third phase where it's the intersection of online and offline companies. We still have to, at the end of the day, humans still need physical goods to do things, right? Like I can't have a software subscription to my morning coffee, So when I think about the Midwest, particularly as an investor, the Midwest has one thing that is untouchable by any other place in the country or on the planet, which is proximity, or it's like central for shipping anything. So like, as I'm driving around like the Midwest looking at companies, I'm sitting across this table from Christine and Lee, and I'm thinking, okay, like, we know that the mom industry or the mom vertical is very fascinating, right? We know that like there's a lot of research out there that how much moms spend, how many births there are a year. So I'm looking at that in my head. We're shipping a physical product. So like, this company cannot exist in Boston or San Francisco, right? Because you can't ship a box to the East Coast in a reasonable amount of time. Like, customers expect 2-day shipping now, right? Because of Amazon. So centrality, it's got this, so a couple themes I'm thinking about in my head while I'm sitting with them. I'm like, okay, like, they have proven this works. Like, in my head, as I'm like writing on my own thesis, and remember, they're not pitching for money, but like, as any good investor, like, I'm sitting here thinking like, okay, I gotta like figure out how to get on this cap table. And so I'm thinking like, okay, physical product, they're in the center of the country. This is exactly where this company should be. Mm-hmm. Number two, they have figured out how to figured out how to make it work, right? And at this point, my entire brain goes to like, how big could this be? And so that was like my big theme as we were talking about it that day, was like, guys, like, here's like, they were already thinking big, but I was like, guys, like, this is where I think it could be. Da, da, da. And then my thing is like, and since I didn't know them that well, like, and Christine's right. Like, I work with my wife all the time, right? So like, we had a lot of parallels. They're good people. We like them. And so I'm thinking like, okay, you know what? This is going too good. And my thing is I always put like a little roadblock in front of people, just a very little one. So as an example, people will be like, oh, do you have a card? And I'm like, no, I don't have a card, but just email me and I'll just I'll spell out my email, and like 95% of people will never email me. Like just, you put a little barrier in front of people just to see whether they really want it, right? And so when I left that day, I said something to them, and I was like, guys, like, how do you know where you're going if you don't know where you are in real time? You're a tech company with transactions on your website. Like every person in this company should be looking at Google Analytics like every second of the day. So that's Wednesday. I had to be at a set of meetings in Groton, Connecticut, like the next day. So like I go to this tech event that night. I think I saw Lee there and a couple of the bump team there. And then I literally rolled out at 9. We packed up the trailer and got out of there, and we had to be in Connecticut that next afternoon. That's crazy, but we did it. So that's Wednesday night. I think it was, I want to say it was like Saturday or Sunday, maybe. I got an email from Lee. And the subject line, it's almost like weird. It's like, it was, I remember looking at the subject line, it made me laugh out loud. It said "too soon" with a question mark.
Yeah.
And it just reminded me of like, it was like we were dating or something, and he was trying to figure out whether it was too soon to call me. So he like emails me, it says "too soon." I'm laughing. And the first thing he says is like, "Hey, I put a TV up on the wall that's loading Google Analytics every 30 seconds. The whole company can see it now. What next?"
Yeah,
and I was like,
remember
well, shit.
that.
I was like, well, shit, he did it. Like I looked over at Dan, I was like, well, shit, he did it. And so I just looked at flight routes, and I was like, I emailed him back, and I said, and Christine was on the email, but I said, hey, look, this is great. The earliest I can fly in is on Sunday. I'll be there. And so that's what I did. I flew back the next week, and the idea was that we sat down at lunch at some restaurant. I want to say it was like that golf course, Christine.
Oh, was it Weaver Ridge maybe?
Yeah, I think that was the one, because that was like the only thing that was like, I don't know, it was what worked for the schedule and all the team to join. So we sat down for lunch that day, and that's kind of where it started. And I think that like for me, I guess I'll stop rambling. I guess what I'll just say is like, there are like, I'm happy to say that like, where I'm on the cap table now, like I feel really good about that. And I think like, it's really important to say that like, this company is really interesting to me personally, because I think there are very few times in your life where there's a foundational shift in the way things are working. And so when I think about like my own like personal, like blood-sucking capitalistic reasons for being involved in the company, not only like, on the investor side, but as an employee too, is like, I'm like, think about what's happening in the mom space. I always describe this to the entire team. Like I think we're a team of almost 70 now. People probably hate me for saying the same thing over and over, but I'm like, guys, the industry is a barbell. It's a barbell. The mom industry is a barbell. We are at the center of it. On the one side of the barbell, you have massive ad-driven companies, right? Think about like the grocery store and all the magazines targeting mom right there at the counter, right? Like massive ad-driven companies here. And then on the other side of the barbell, we have massive CPG and retail companies. So, you guys are nodding, right? But so like massive. At the core or at the center is us. And the big foundational shift is that moms have more, like moms don't want to go to Walmart if they don't have to, right? Like we've already seen that in all the data. The rise of e-commerce is not going to slow down. And on the other side, ads, like ad businesses are being disrupted, right? Like when's the last time anybody like said, oh, I'm watching Hulu, that ad's really awesome. No, it's like, I don't know about you guys, like my wife and I, if we're watching Hulu and like the ad comes on, it's got a little timer, it'll be like, oh, 2 minutes and 20 seconds. We're like, okay, bathroom breaks, do something with the kids, so the point is like personally and professionally, it's really interesting to me, because this is like, it's like when I started my first company too, it's like, gosh, people are going to need to be able to host stuff. That stuff has to live in a space somewhere. I'll build data centers here. And that's, so it's like, you have to like, there's very few times in your life where you see these like big changes happening. And I just was like, I was really drawn to Bump because of that. Anyway, I realize I'm kind of rambling on this thing, so I'll be quiet. But Andrew, where do you want to go?
Well, Christine, what was your experience like?
That is such a big question. There's so many ways I can take that. Yeah, so I mean, like, I think from our experience, so like that was kind of like the start of like working with Paul. And I think you know, the great thing that Paul has brought to us is thinking differently. Because like he said, I mean, he was like pounding on the table, like seeing, you know, like this multi-billion-dollar opportunity, right? And we're just thinking, okay, how do we take this thing from like 2 to 4 to 8? You know, how do we just keep doubling every year? And so I think like that was like the most amazing thing to kind of witness. But yeah, I mean, like from the start of you know, Paul working with us, I think, yeah, I mean, like we've just been growing exponentially. And I think what's unique to us, and Paul kind of alluded to this a little bit too, is that we took on a very, very small investment early on, but we haven't had to raise anything to get to where we are today. And I think that's a testament to our team. And you know, the ability to like test things and move very, very quickly in order to do that. But because of that, we've had to be smart in the risks that we take, because I mean, we are using our profit to fund the growth, right? So you just have to be smart with that. But yeah, I mean, I think from, you know, from the time that Paul came on, I mean, it's just been really cool to see kind of how everybody is just thinking much bigger than like what we originally were thinking. And that's been the fun part to see. I remember like, Paul, when you first got on, I think, did we have like that 10x board, which we still talk about 10x ideas all the
Yes,
time, but we started it then.
that's
Do you
right.
remember that? Yeah.
Yeah,
So like
that whiteboard
company-wide,
right there. Yeah.
yeah. So company-wide people could just post ideas on like what they think the next 10x idea would be for bump boxes. And that was really cool just to see everybody's ideas and thought process. And, you know, we were able to pull some ideas and really run with those. To get the entire team involved. But I think you know, as we kind of like look to the future, you know, it's incredible. I think we did like our, you know, 3 and 5 year planning the other day, and it was like, okay, in 3 years, like we're anticipating, you know, potentially 500 people at bump boxes. Like
Mhm.
that's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
this isn't like an open, I mean, this isn't like you know, what do you call it? Like, I don't want to be secret about like our ambitions, right? Like our
Right.
ambitions are
Right.
massive.
Right.
You
Right.
know, and I think one of the things I just want to say, like on Christine's point though, there is that like, you know, bump boxes is no smarter than anybody else.
Hmm.
Like the people that we have, me, Christine, Lee, anybody else, we're not the smartest people on the planet at all. Like that is not why we double, triple revenue every year. The only reason we win is because we iterate more quickly than anybody else, right? And
Right. Right.
that's one of the big takeaways I hope people listening to this really realize, is that like success is not a function of how many years you're working on something.
Mhm.
Like there's no glory in like thinking about an idea for 30 days or 6 years or whatever, right?
Mhm.
But like for us, it's like success is just a function of the number of things we try. How many tests per day? How many emails per day? How many boxes per day, right? Success, and that's like a really important thing for people, because entrepreneurship, I think there's a false narrative around entrepreneurship. I think that false narrative is like, you have to be smart, you have to be X, you have to be Y. Like, you know what? Like to be a successful as an entrepreneur, you just have to not be lazy. Right? You don't have to be smart, you just have to not be lazy. Um,
Well, and being
so anyway,
resourceful is super important too. It's like you
yeah.
have to like seek out your own information. So I mean, like when you think about like Lee and I, like we didn't have a background in e-commerce, we didn't have a background in tech. Like we've been self-taught in a lot of areas, and a lot of our team has too. So I mean, I think that like, you know, understanding that the information is out there, you just have to go get it. And it's that simple. I mean, to Paul's point, just don't be lazy. The information is out there and there's no
Yeah.
excuse really. Like,
Yeah. And I think for like everybody in the listening to the call too, I think that
mhm,
one of the really amazing things about the internet is that you don't need large addressable markets to build
mhm.
billion-dollar companies,
Right,
right? Like let's
right.
just kind of let's pull on that thread for a second. I think like 50 years ago, for Procter and Gamble and companies of its size to be billion-dollar companies, you had to have lots of capital,
Mhm,
because you had to have lots of products, and then you had to buy up all the newspaper and TV inventory that you could. Then you had to
mhm.
pay the retailers and share the revenue, and you had to like have billions of dollars to make billions of dollars.
Mhm.
The beauty of the internet now is that like everything, every idea that anybody has ever had, the internet allows you to find the 1,000 people somewhere on the planet that want to buy that thing,
Right.
right? Like and that's my argument to people is like, look, if you can find, like, surely there are 1,000 people that want to buy whatever you want to, you want to make. And if you can find them, you could probably make 100 grand a year for yourself pretty easy. And then like with bump boxes, right? Like theoretically, I mean, not theoretically, realistically, everybody's got a mom, right? so like, that's the thing. Like like speaking as like a blood-sucking capitalist here, here's the thing. While we know that every pregnancy is different, right? And I say that as a dad, like never having been pregnant, but I've got 3 kids. I know that every pregnancy is different, right? Even within like, my 3 kids. But as a capitalist, what I know is that a pregnancy in Maine and a pregnancy in Wyoming and a pregnancy in Japan are generally the same, right? And that is very fascinating when you start to think about like how big this thing can scale. And then on top of that, you start to think about like, what are the additional things that mom needs, right? Like I kind of alluded to it at the beginning, like the box business is where we started. We added on corporate wellness, right? It turns out companies like Pepsi need their employees to know that they care about their moms and dads, right? And then it's like, well, wait a second. Moms need other stuff like from their insurance company. Like, why don't we get mom everything she needs from her insurance company for free? Right. So then we added that on, right? And like 0 cost to mom, and we can get all thousands of dollars of free stuff for her, and we do all the work, right? And then, soon you add telehealth, right? Like, why should mom have to go over to the doctor, physically see somebody if she just wants to talk to somebody real quick about this weird thing that's going on, right? Like, and so everything starts small, right? And I think, and then you just kind of like success compounds. That's the thing to take away from that, is that success compounds and laziness compounds, right?
Absolutely.
That's the scary thing about compounding, like compounding growth or compounding is the 8th wonder of the modern world. I don't know what the other 7 are, but I think Albert Einstein said it was the 8th one. So I just went with that.
and so, so fast forward to today, actually, was it last year, Christine? Bump Boxes launched a $1 million seed fund. Is that correct?
Yeah, the Bump Fund. Yeah, absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're looking for, businesses to invest in that are focused on mom one way or another, because we think it's super important. So I know, like when we first started, we had a hard time raising money, because when you originally started, we're like, okay, every other startup raises, and so it's like, we definitely need to raise. And so I think, like after, speaking with a lot of VCs, it's like, the mom niche wasn't as interesting to them.
Yep.
And so, kind of realizing that back then, I mean, like we didn't care, we were going to do it anyway. So it didn't matter what they thought about the niche that we were in. We knew moms and we knew they needed help. So that's what we were going to do. Yep. So I think, like looking back on our experience and how difficult it was, it's like, that's something that we want to fix. And it's something that should be fixed, is that these businesses that are mom focused need funding. Yep. They need funding, and we don't want, other companies like us to go through what we went through when it comes to raising, right? And so we're trying to change that. I mean, it's kind of like sending the ladder back down, right? It's like, you want to help these other mom-focused businesses that want to grow, that want to be big, that, want to do it. And the beauty of it is, like, we don't want these companies to make the same mistakes that we did. So any of those learnings that we've had along the way, it's like, let's help these other founders and make that happen. So that's been really important to us.
Paul, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, like factually, she's nailed it. I think the thing I think a lot about though is like, and maybe this is outside the scope of the call. So Andrew, you got to like reel me in here, but like, the thing about it is that, and I'm trying to pick my words here, but, going back to the investing side here for a minute, what I kind of find that happens pretty often in other geographies is that when one company really takes off, somehow, for whatever reason, other companies tend to start, right? Like, I don't know if it's because other people in the region realize that it's possible. I don't know, right? But like, I don't know why. I'm not going to like posit why it happens, but it does happen, right? I guess the thing is like, I'm optimistic that the entrepreneurial activity in Peoria will pick up. but I'm concerned that I haven't seen it yet, right? So like here we are, for us, we 3 years ago, I think we were like, I mean, I can go look, but let's just say we're at somewhere between $2 and $4 million. We've doubled that every year. We finished up last year at just shy of a $36 million run rate. That's not a secret, right? Like our ambitions are much bigger. Like I think we can be a $2 billion company within the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. My concern is that like, I don't understand why more startups haven't started in the area. Now, again, I don't know if you want to go down that path, but I think like Peoria's entrepreneurial activity is not only good for Peoria, but selfishly, it's good for us. Right? Because like, for example, I want my team to be surrounded by even more entrepreneurs, right? Like if you look at the original building, the 7719 building that we have on Pioneer Parkway there, it was originally built to be, the original idea was that Bump would share space with other companies. Like that's what it was built for. We just never found, I mean, for whatever reason, never found fun, great, interesting companies doing interesting things that wanted to be there as well. So, but like, I hope that changes. Like, I hope that, as we, keep working, like we're not going anywhere, right? Like Bump's not going anywhere. We're going to keep doing what we do. But like, I just really want to see more people start stuff in Peoria. Whether it's a side hustle, to make some extra money, that's amazing. Or whether it's like, a big swing, kind of like us, like either way, I just want to see more of it. Because it's good for the community and it's good for us.
Mm-hmm. So that's a really good point. You had really sage advice earlier in regards to, Christine, from your side, not making the same mistakes. Mm-hmm. And of course, part of the Bump Fund is also smart money, right? Like being able to advise and share input and learning from your mistakes. Mm-hmm. So, we have the corporations and we also have the new business ventures, the startups. What would you say to yourself, both Christine and Paul, 5 years ago, right? When this all 6 years ago, mm-hmm. when it all started, and really to reach the corporations here, and of course the large service organizations that we have, including the city and others. Government spaces. How can we bring this sort of forward thinking of experimentation to the fore, right? How can we, for the lack of a better word, start to iterate and to build and to experiment and to celebrate failure? What does that look like from your perspective, if you could share it both from the corporate side as well as the startup side?
I'm not sure I understand the question. So I'm happy to ramble about it, but
so at the heart of it, the question is, what advice, if I was, okay, so there's two parts. If I was a CEO of a large corporation, and if I was a startup founder, mm-hmm. and I'm struggling, right? I have all these challenges ahead of me that I'm having to deal with, put out fires every single day. And you're talking about experimentation, you're talking about the exponential growth that you're compounding year over year. What are the things that I can start with? For example, Lee put up the Google Analytics TV. Mm-hmm. What are the simple things that, behavioral changes, environmental changes that we can, from a corporate side as a CEO and from a side as a small business or startup, what can I do now to start failing fast, learning and going through that build, measure, learn loop?
Well, I, as you can probably tell, I have no shortage of opinions. So I'll be brief, and then I want to give Christine a chance to say something too. Look, I think so. You posed the question as like, what should a startup do? What should a corporate do? Right? Mm-hmm. Very different, as you know. So let's just kind of peel that back a little bit. On the startup side, the goal is simply to get one new transaction every single day. Like just get it off the ground. Mm-hmm. A bias to action is all you really need there. And we can kind of talk about that further if you want. But like for startups, it's very simple because, it's probably only 1 or 2 people working together to kind of get this thing going. Don't write business plans. Don't talk about it with like somebody at Starbucks. Like, don't waste your time, just find the customer and start selling. The goal is to have consistent sales, even if it's just one per day, right? Just get there. Corporates, on the other hand, that are thinking about this is a nuanced problem because, leadership doesn't scale linearly. Like, again, problems compound, and so I guess just to be really as crisp as I can be on this, for corporates, the best thing you can do is go acquire somebody that's much smaller than you in the space, because those people would have never applied for a job at your company anyway.
That's true.
Right? Like
That's true.
It's the unfortunate truth, right? Like, Christine is unemployable now. She will not apply. Like, it doesn't matter what happens to bump boxes. Like, think about that. And I'm talking about Christine like she's not in the room, but when you think
you're
about
fine.
like great teams, we are unemployable. The only way to get us is to think about like what it would take to get us to work with you. So I think great CEOs need to think about that, right? Like, if you're serious, if you're really stuck in a rut and you're thinking about a shift, you're not going to be able to teach entrepreneurship. Anybody that thinks that's possible is crazy to me. I think entrepreneurship can be learned. I do not think it can be taught. So I think that the best thing to do is you have to bring DNA in right away, acquire them right away. If you can't do that, like maybe there's a governance issue, maybe there's other reasons, maybe you don't have the cash. If you can't do that, the second best thing is carve out like 3 to 4 people tops. Like, find your 3 most ambitious people, lock them in a room, and let them give them 0 rules. Just tell them they have to do the same thing a startup does. Go find me 1 new customer a day, whatever it is, right?
Yep.
But they must stay outside the rules, because the thing is, leadership doesn't scale. You can't have, let's say you've got 500 employees. You can't have 500 people flailing, right? Like, I can't have 70 people flailing. But at the same time, if you look at kind of our structure internally, I have 3 of us on the team that are the growth team. They're allowed to operate. They're almost like, it's going to sound kind of cheesy, but they're what we call the skunk works team, right? So like, they operate off on their own, finding, testing rapidly, incredibly fast testing. The minute they find something, it's institutionalized to the rest of the team so they can be repeated and scaled, right? Let me just kind of pause there. I want to give Christine a chance here, but I want to put a number on this, right? I want to put a number on this because, like, it's important for people to understand this concept of becoming unemployable. So for better or for worse, I want to give you a comp on the market from 2 days ago to tell you like how much money is at stake here for every person listening to this call. You guys know, like, I said it earlier, like, we ended last year at a $36 million run rate. We will double that again this year. We'll double it again next year. We'll keep doing it, right? Just 2 days ago, Owlet, which is not a competitor to us, but they are in the mom space. They make a wearable tracker, right? A little thing you can kind of put on your baby, make sure the baby's breathing, They just went public via a SPAC 2 days ago with $50 million of revenue last year at a $1.4 billion market cap. Now, we could argue whether or not that's real and whatever, but that doesn't matter. It is real. That was the market cap, right? So now think about that. Like, let's go back to the reason I say that is 2 things. 2 reasons I say that. Number one, for the people listening, like, there's money on the table out there, guys. Go get it. That's yours. Like, go get it. The only people stopping you is you. And all that, like, creative navel gazing. Let's do a lean startup canvas. That's such BS, right? Just get started. But for the corporates, you've got to think about buying these people faster. Because think about it this way. I'm going to talk about bump boxes as an investor, right? Not as a team member. Here's the thing. As an investor, I now know that the market is rewarding our run rate with a $1.4 billion market cap. Those guys raised $50 million. We have not, right? So I know now that's an option. Now what that means to me is, if you want to buy me, why should I take anything less than 3 or 4x that amount? Right? Because otherwise I can go to the public markets next week via SPAC and do very similar things, right? So for corporates, this is like so counterintuitive because they're used to like long projects, long timelines, right? But for companies like us and for the people listening here, technology is your lever.
Mhm.
It's your like speed, right? And like the speed is what gets you those huge valuations. And I think the point is, I'm just trying to show you optimistically that on both sides of the table here, corporate and startup, huge potentials out there for you. So anyway, rambling there. I want to give Christine a chance too here.
So Christine, I'm curious. Is Bump Boxes your first startup?
Yeah.
First ever business? Like
First ever
no
business.
no lemonade stand when you were growing up, nothing.
I mean, the only thing I did when I was growing up was I would try to sell rocks door to door in my neighborhood, and God bless my neighbors because I actually bought some. That's the only thing I've really done.
Okay, so
That's
second
it. Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
We have a few minutes left. What would you say to other women entrepreneurs, or people struggling in the really early startup phase where they've not found product market fit, they've not found or deeply understood who their customers are? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think, going back to Paul's point, I think, a lot of people spend so much time planning and trying to like perfect something before they launch it. Don't do that. You have to just try to sell something and see what happens. See if people buy it. If they don't, talk to a couple customers, change your offering, then try to sell that. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to keep executing. It's more important to do something than to over plan and try to make it perfect. So like, I think one of the things that one of the reasons why my husband and I make such a great team is because he's very much that way. Like, he is just on the gas pedal, go, 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 execute, execute, execute. And then I'm kind of like I kind of pump the brakes a little bit, and say, okay, like, we just have to make sure that, we have the structure in place, and everything kind of moving in the right direction at the right time. And that was something that I had to learn transitioning from the corporate world to startup world, was that, it's not going to be perfect, and it shouldn't be perfect. You just have to move. You have to move quickly. And that's the most important thing I can say to another founder, is you just have to move fast. You don't have to be an expert in the field. Like, there's a lot of things that you put barriers on yourself as to like why you can't move quickly, but you've just got to go. You've just got to do it. So I think that's the most important thing I can say to another founder, is you just have to be able to execute and do it fast.
That is awesome.
Don't overthink it. Well, don't overthink it. That's the thing, right?
Right.
Like, one of the things that a lot of people do accidentally is they're so romantic about how they make their money. Like, like, here's the thing. If you haven't found product market, and I don't mean to be rude, right? But just to like be really, like, I think what doesn't exist enough in the startup world is candid conversations about what really needs to happen. When we talk about like team and traction, look, here's the thing. Don't overthink it. If you don't have product market fit, one of two things, there are only two things that are wrong. Only two, not a million, only two. It's one or the other, or both. One, people don't want what you make. Okay, that's one. Number two, you didn't find anybody that wants what you make. Like, they either don't want it or they don't know about it. It's one of those two things.
Yep.
And if you can be unromantic about which of those it is, you can shift your tactic in an hour.
Yep.
Right. Like, I have this rule in my portfolio that, like, if you don't have $1 million of revenue, you're only allowed to ask me questions about sales. You cannot ask me questions about corporate culture or like term sheet. I don't know. You cannot, like, I will not answer the email or the question unless it's sales related before your first $1 million. Because, like, there's no reason for anything else.
Right.
Yeah. Like, if you don't have a business, you don't have, nothing else really matters, right?
Absolutely. Well, and like a lot of founders too, like they focus on the launch, and then they don't realize that there's stuff that you have to do after the launch. Like, the launch is probably one of the easier things you're going to do. And so, like, I remember when we first launched, we thought we would have thousands of people pouring into our website. I mean, our sales would be huge that first day. Guess what? The only transaction we had was from my mom. We had one transaction the first day. That was it. And so, you know what? I went up to Grand Prairie Mall and I started passing out flyers. I mean, I did what I had to do to go and get it. We went to trade shows. We got in front of people. I mean, like, you have to just execute. You have to go. You have to figure it out and get in front of your customers the ways that you know how. But I mean, like, that's how we started, because we thought the same thing. Oh, you launch it, that's it. You know, it's going to be an instant success. That's not how it works. You have to figure out marketing and you have to sell it.
And so your bubble was burst really quickly on day one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, it was, because here we thought like that's all you have to do is launch something on the internet and it's just a magical success. And it's like, that is not how it works. That is not how it works.
That's right.
And so
That's right.
yeah, so like you have to do what you got to do, and you have to be scrappy, you know, especially when you're first starting out, to get the word out. And there's ways that you can do it, but you have to be willing to do it, and you have to be humbled enough to not care. You know, I didn't care that I was going up, you know, out throughout Peoria and handing out flyers. It didn't matter to me. I was going to make this thing work no matter what. And so it's like when you see other entrepreneurs doing that, like that's when you know that they have drive for what they're doing. They're going to make it happen. And so I think that's something that we did in the early days that really mattered.
And so what did you learn from that experience handing out flyers? Did you have a huge amount of people that said, oh, this is awesome, took it? Or did you get feedback? What was that like?
Yeah. So, I mean, the interesting thing from like handing out flyers, even being at trade shows, is you can practice your pitch, right? So you talk about like product market fit and, you know, can you find your customer and what's really resonating with them? So like when we went to trade shows or passed out flyers, like we would change the pitch and we would highlight specific key points about our subscription and see what got people drawn to it. So the minute that they have kind of like that eyebrow raise, like, oh, that's awesome, then we ran with that. That's when we knew what mom wanted. And so it's a very easy way and a fast way to test what your offering is. I mean, like we went to a trade show in New York and we started off as a gift box company. And, you know, like within a half hour, we changed our whole business to a subscription box service, right? And that was just talking to one person. And so like you have to be willing and able to pivot and change really fast depending on what your customers want.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And to Paul's point, you know, like the brutally transparent conversations that people don't have as an early stage startup, right? Like, hey, if you're not what is the one necessary condition for to have an actual business? That you have paying customers and lots of them coming back. And unfortunately, we don't have that kind of conversations, but we want to have those kind of conversations.
Yeah, I mean, I think like maybe this is a discussion either now or later, but I think like I'm very black and white about this. I think there's only two stages to any company. Like literally, there's only two stages. Will it work? How big can it be?
Right. Yeah.
Will it work? The answer to that is simple. Just get one person you don't know to pay you. That's it. If you can get one person you don't know to pay you, we know it works, right? Then you switch to how big it could be. And then we can say, okay, well, how many of that person's persona, whatever, are there? And how do we go get them, right? Like, can we use Facebook ads? Do we use social media? Do we use LinkedIn? Do we use trade shows, right? And so I think like for entrepreneurs in the room here, I hope I don't come across as like Debbie Downer here. I think there's hope in that. I think there's hope in that. I think that makes, despite it being very harsh, I think it makes entrepreneurship more accessible to the masses, right? Like somewhere. So oh, by the way, let me also say, sorry, side note, but Andrew, I want to say this, like, you know, we're talking about entrepreneurship in the context of like bump boxes, right? But I also don't want people to think like, oh gosh, like it's not go big or go home. There is a middle ground. So for example, let's just say somebody in this audience is an accountant. I don't know, I'm making that up because that was Christine's background, right? So like, if you're an accountant and you work at OSF or Caterpillar or whatever, the other way to be an entrepreneur is to think about like, if you want, how do I find one or two more clients after hours that might pay me like a $2,000 a month retainer for part-time bookkeeping? Like that's entrepreneurship too, right? And in many ways, America would be much better off if we would teach 50,000 people how to do that as a side hustle, rather than have like 10 more bump boxes in the country, right? Like if we could teach the masses how to get started and how to like get them, like this goes back to what you and I talked about last time, Andrew, about equity too, right? Like making like entrepreneurship equitable. We should be training people to get started, you know, as a side hustle. Because even Christine, she said it in her own story, bump boxes was a side hustle. And my experience as an investor is most things start as a side hustle. Very few people on the planet have the capability to like quit their job outright and go try something new. Very few people, like, if you read TechCrunch or whatever, maybe it looks like everybody does it. Nobody does it. Like, nobody does it. Everything's a side hustle, until it isn't.
Mhm.
So, Andrew, I don't know
Wow.
where you wanted this thing to go, but like, we have
No,
definitely
this
like
this
went
is
over the
so
limit.
great. Like, hey, I want to thank you, Paul and Christine. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Invaluable advice for the next generations and the generations of side hustlers to come, right? Like, and so
Yeah.
hopefully we will see that sometime soon in Peoria. Of course, we have the Regional Innovation Hub Distillery Labs coming online. And so we're very excited to continue to engage with you, Christine and Paul. Thanks so much for your time for today.
You got it. And hopefully, like, when we get out the other side of this COVID stuff, it'd be fun to kind of give you all a tour of the place and that sort of thing. But I hope everybody understands, safety is sort of paramount, especially as a mom company, right? We got to take it super safe there.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. All right. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Until the next one, we will see you at the next Whiskey Talks. Bye for now. See you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks.